Krabs, you've done it again!
I'll say you have.
SpongeBob?
How could you, Mr. Krabs? You promised these children Krabby the Clown, but all I saw out there was Chibi the Cheapskate!
Well, what do you know? Moana 2 is now officially out in theaters after a pretty long wait. This was a pretty anticipated sequel, kind of. And now getting out of the movie, I have to say, it was a movie, alright. Don't get me wrong, there are some positives to this movie, but the negatives kinda are weighing it out just a little bit. Like, it's a movie that people are giving the pass for, but if you really take a look at what this movie originally was, the cracks start to really show. Most people are probably giving this the pass because in recent years, Disney movies, with the exception of Encanto, have been either mid or just really bad. Like, you have Wish, you have Strange World, you have the exception of Encanto, and I could go on and so forth. But with this movie, Disney just resorted to the sequel button so fast. They tried Wish, an 100th anniversary movie, and it flopped hard. Like, Disney thought this was gonna do way better than its measly box office that it's had. So they hit the sequel button so fast that so many of these sequels are now coming out. We have Moana 2 now, we have Zootopia 2 next year, so we already know Disney's gonna be sequel, remake for years to come. That's never gonna stop. And you know, hey, it's working. Moana 2 has one of the biggest animated openings of all time, so I guess they're doing something right. But not for the best quality either. It's quite a mixed bag. I'll just explain my thoughts, because you have some people that are on the brighter side of things, you have people on the severely negative side of things, and you have people just in the middle. I'm kind of in the middle, but also just a little disappointed on how they just Frankenstein this movie. I'll explain.
Aren't you?
Don't! That's my grandma's!
That's my grandma's. I ate my grandma!
Okay, I'll start with my positives. For a movie that was supposed to be a series on Disney Plus that was kind of reworked into a movie, I will say at a visual standpoint, the animation does look on point. It does honestly look better, and for what the team did, it probably did look a lot, not worse, but just on a lesser scale than what this looks like. I say on a visual standpoint, the movie looks fine. I'll just say it's kind of a downgrade, not the animation, but just the movie in general. I know a lot of people are, like, praising the movie, but just, it's an okay sequel, but there's so many things that are missing from it that really just do not touch the original at all. First of all, I'll say, none of you guys will be remembering any of the songs from this movie. None of these songs even touch the first movie's songs, and it is very prevalent that Lin-Manuel Miranda's not in this movie. He's working on Mufasa the Lion King. I don't know why he chose to do that. I don't know, something may have happened, but the fact that he is gone from this movie, it really shows with the songs here. There's like one or two good ones, but they're not songs that you're gonna be hearing on repeat over and over and over again. There's no song in here that's gonna be the next You're Welcome, the next Shiny. That's not gonna happen. There was maybe one song with a character that when we initially saw her, we all thought that she was going to be the villain. And another time, again, there is no villain in this Disney movie. Like, it seems so hard for Disney to give us, like, a proper villain. We don't even have villain songs anymore. Wish you don't count.
And this is the thanks
Hopefully we see some sort of villain in Moana 3, but I'm not counting on it. Maybe. After that mid-credit scene, I'm a little on the fence about it. We'll talk about that later. But as for the story itself, the movie really treads on a lot of things that the original movie did, even with the songs. We're not talking about the songs anymore, but even just with the story. The story kinda does the same thing. Moana isn't sure if she can do this. Then suddenly after a song, she feels she can do this. She voyages out. We have these new characters, but they're really forgettable. I mean, one thing I'll say the movie does, it does expand the world a little bit. But these characters in general, they're not really something to write about. You have the character that is a big fan of Maui, he can understand the writings, and you have this old guy, doesn't really do anything, it's just your old guy you have in an animated movie. You have a girl that's basically obsessed with all the boats, and then you have just the pig and the chicken there. Honestly, just for comedic relief. There wasn't a lot of funny moments in the movie. I think there was the one time I laughed when Maui first met the old guy and made a kidney stone joke. That was the one time it got me. But speaking of Maui, he doesn't really meet with our main characters for quite a long time in the movie, and that really surprised me. We really don't see much of Maui until like an hour into the movie. And some people may be disappointed by that, but the trailers were kind of misleading on that part. And as for the movie's runtime, the pacing felt weird. Like, it wasn't slow, but you could tell this was originally supposed to be a series. Like, there are certain points in the series that feel like that's a beat, that's the end of the episode, and then it moves on to the next little arc. Like, there's multiple different, like, stories they have to deal with, and it does feel like the plot of a TV show, and gets to the end by facing all these different problems. It doesn't feel like a movie's runtime. It does kind of feel Frankenstein together. There are some cracks, but they were able to make it work. Kudos, but not the best it was able to be done. I'm kind of worried that the people over at Disney were kind of rushed when they realized, hey, this series that we made, we're starting over. We're making this into an entire movie, Frankenstein it together, do whatever you have to do. And they somehow got it out by November. But it still kind of does feel weird in the plot, and you are gonna notice that when you watch the movie. Like, you have the Kukumora little side story, where the character that's obsessed with Maui actually does have a reason to be there. He can understand their writings, but that's about it. The Kukumora joins the main cast of characters, and then you have this character that's been locked up inside the clam, which I thought was going to be a lot more interesting, and then she just doesn't show up for the rest of the movie. Like, she controls bats. I don't think she has the powers of bats, she just controls them. And she's been locked by the god that's been wreaking havoc on all these islands. And that's about it. We really don't get much from her. I was like, okay, then why'd you even set her up? Just to sing a mediocre song to her? I will say, just adding these more characters, it does feel a little more different now, because in the original movie, it was just Moana and Maui, but now you have a larger group of characters, all with their strengths and weaknesses, all trying to get from point A to point B. And as for our antagonist, quote-unquote, he doesn't even show his face in the actual movie. It's just a storm that they have to take down, pull an island up, and then the day is saved. It's a really weird kind of antagonist to do. The original movie's antagonist was much better in a lot of ways, and the impact at the end will hit a lot harder. At the end of the movie, something happens to Moana. It kind of treads the same territory as a bunch of films. I'll give a little spoiler warning if you're really caring about that for Moana 2 of all movies. But Moana kind of dies when she's trying to touch the island at the bottom. Maui loses all his tattoos because of the fight, and because of that, she gets struck by lightning and she dies for like a minute or two. No one really expected it, you know how it goes. But when she comes back, she has a tattoo on her arm, just like Maui. And now it gives her abilities. They didn't really explain it that much. They just said, oh, you have this now. Alright, we're not going to talk about that anymore. Just continue with the story. We gotta wrap it up now. I feel like if this stayed a series, they could have fleshed that out a little bit more. But I will say the world building in this movie is the really only thing I'll say they did a good job of. They made the world feel a lot bigger than it was in the first movie. And with all these islands coming together, there's a lot of stories they can tell. Hopefully with a better writing team and not Frankensteining a show into a movie again. If you're gonna do a movie, do a movie. If you're gonna do a series, keep it a series. Don't intertwine them back, because it really showed in this movie. It's almost feels like an This might be an insult to some and some to not, because some of them are okay, but this kind of feels like those direct-to-DVD Disney sequels we had a long time ago that are still in the vault. And honestly, it's not the worst of the bunch, I would say, in those direct-to-DVD sequels, but it's just like, okay. The first movie really never needed a sequel in the first place. People talked about it, but after Moana being like the most streamed movie of all time, and also just everyone loving the songs from that movie, if anything, this movie was neck and neck with Frozen, not in terms of box office, but of popularity. So a sequel was inevitable, and we got it through this. And it's just okay. I know audiences will just say, hey, that was pretty good. My theater clapped when this movie ended. They were relatively quiet, thank God. The theater was full of a bunch of little kids. When I walked in there, I was like, oh God, I'm gonna hate this so much. I don't think I talked about this in my Inside Out 2 review, but that was such a horrible experience when I was in there. I liked the movie, but the kids in there were terrible. I won't get into that much of the story, but most people are just walking away with this movie being okay. The Rotten Tomatoes score for critics severely dropped from the first movie, and now after seeing the movie, I can kinda understand the reason why. It's just okay. Do you need to see this in theaters? That is the big question. Honestly, if you really do like Moana, and you've been really excited for this, go ahead. You'll have a decent time at the movies. It's not gonna blow you away in terms of just expanding the world, but I'll say if it's just an okay movie. But if you don't have the biggest interest, you don't really have to see this in theaters. A lot of movies are coming up right now that I feel like will turn out better than this movie did. Not hating on it, it's just a mid movie, not gonna lie. Out of all the animated movies that have turned out mid this year, I will say this is like the least mid. This movie's like a 6 out of 10, just in my opinion. Originally it was a 5, but the more I thought about it and the more I just gave it some thought, it's like a 6 out of 10. It's just okay. And you know, that's fair in a lot of people's books. So I've heard from other people talking about this movie. There was a random mid-credit scene, and yes, I wasn't expecting it, but Tamatoa did show up. And this whole post-credit scene kind of set up the Bat character, and we actually got to see the Storm character, and apparently they're just plotting. It's basically setting up Moana 3. I guess you could say you can stay for the credits. I wasn't expecting much. I was just sitting down, getting ready to type my review. But anyways, what did you think of Moana 2? Did you like it? Did you not like it? You're kind of in the middle? This is a pretty decisive movie I'm starting to see. Let me know down in the comments, and I will catch you guys in the next video. I hope you guys also had a great Thanksgiving. Peace out, everyone.